Are you deaf, old man? Or just stupid? The voice sliced through the quiet afternoon air, sharp and synthetic, like the cheap suit its owner wore. Brent Donaldson, the new manager of the small private airfield, stood with his hands on his hips, his polished shoes a stark insult to the oil-stained concrete. He was staring down at the elderly man whose legs were sticking out from under a battered, sun-faded Ford F-150 that looked like it had survived a war. This is not a public garage. This is a restricted access zone for active aviation personnel. Now get this piece of junk out of here before I have it compacted into a cube with you still under it. The old man didn't respond. The only sound was the gentle, rhythmic scrape of a wrench turning on a bolt. It was a patient, measured sound, completely at odds with the frantic energy radiating from Brent. The manager's face, already flushed with a sense of self-importance, deepened to a shade of angry crimson. He was used to being obeyed. He was a man of action, a man of spreadsheets and profit margins, and this greasy fossil was disrupting his sterile, orderly world. He kicked the truck's front tire, a gesture of petty dominance that produced a dull thud and a small cloud of dust. I'm talking to you. This is private property. Trespassing is a federal offense, you know. I will call the sheriff. The wrench stopped turning. A hand, gnarled and stained with grease but surprisingly steady, emerged from under the chassis and placed the tool neatly on a clean rag laid out on the ground. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion that spoke of joints that had seen too many miles, the old man slid himself out. He was perhaps 70, maybe older. His face was a road map of wrinkles, his hair a shock of white that was surprisingly thick. He wore a simple, faded denim work shirt and jeans that were clean but worn thin at the knees. He rose to his feet not with the fragility of age, but with a strange, coiled grace, his back impossibly straight. He didn't look at Brent. Instead, his pale blue eyes, clear and observant, scanned the airfield. He took in the Cessna parked on the far tarmac, the heat shimmering off the runway, the windsock hanging limp in the still air. It was as if he was assessing a tactical situation, not facing down a belligerent middle manager. From the cool shade of a hangar bay, Air Force Captain Eva Rostova watched the scene unfold. She was here on a temporary assignment, overseeing a joint training exercise with civilian contractors, and was waiting for a logistics transport. She'd been about to get a coffee when the manager's grating voice had caught her attention. At first, she'd felt a prickle of annoyance at the old man. The manager was a jerk, sure, but rules were rules. Then she saw him stand up. It was the posture that got her first. It wasn't just straight, it was aligned. Every soldier, every pilot, every operator spent years having that kind of alignment drilled into them until it became part of their bone structure. It was the posture of a man who had spent a lifetime at attention, even when he was at ease. Her eyes narrowed. She started noticing other things, small details that Brent, in his civilian arrogance, would never see. The way the old man's eyes didn't just look, they scanned, moving in a practiced, disciplined pattern from left to right, near to far. He wasn't just looking at the airfield, he was mapping it. Then she saw the tattoo on his forearm, barely visible beneath a smudge of grease. It was faded to a pale blue-gray, almost blending in with his skin, but the design was unmistakable to someone who knew where to look. It wasn't a standard unit crest. It was a bird of prey, an eagle with a gear clutched in its talons, its wings swept back in a dive. It was the insignia of a ghost unit, a program so deeply classified its existence was only whispered about in certain circles. The Experimental Aviation and Systems Development Group. They were the ones who tested the impossible, who flew the prototypes that officially didn't exist. They were legends. Eva felt a chill despite the afternoon heat. Brent, meanwhile, took the old man's silence as insolence. That's it. I'm done asking. He pulled out his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen with self-righteous fury. You've got 10 seconds to start this rust bucket and drive it off my airfield, or the next person you talk to will be wearing a badge. The old man finally turned his gaze to Brent. His eyes weren't angry or fearful. They were simply calm. It was a profound, unnerving stillness, the kind a bomb disposal expert might have. The distributor cap is cracked, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Just need to replace it. Won't be long. The simple, factual statement seemed to enrage Brent even more. I don't care if the engine is made of gold. This isn't your workshop. The manager was now practically screaming, his voice echoing across the tarmac and drawing stares from a few mechanics working on a nearby Gulf Stream. The public humiliation was the point. He wanted to make an example of this old vagrant. You people have no respect for property, no respect for authority. You think you can just wander wherever you want. He took a step closer, puffing out his chest. I am the authority here, and I am telling you to leave. Now the old man simply held his gaze, his expression unchanging. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He just stood there, a pillar of quiet dignity in the face of a storm of impotent rage. This silent defiance was the ultimate insult to a man like Brent. It denied him the satisfaction of a reaction, the validation of seeing his power affect someone. He was about to escalate, perhaps physically grab the old man's arm, when a voice from the main control tower crackled over the airfield's public address system, a sound usually reserved for weather warnings or emergency announcements. Attention, all ground personnel. Stand by for a Priority 1 communique from Mountain Command. A wave of confusion rippled through the few people out on the tarmac. Mountain Command was NORAD. They didn't make announcements at small private airfields in the middle of nowhere. Eva felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She knew this protocol. This was not a drill. A different voice, crisp and urgent, cut through the static. Unidentified traffic. You are broadcasting on a restricted channel. Please identify. The first voice returned, sterner this time, laced with an authority that tolerated no argument. This is Sky Sentry. We have an active Sentinel event. We are attempting to reach a local asset. Call sign, Iron Eagle. Repeat, we are trying to establish contact with Iron Eagle. Acknowledge. The local controllers sounded flustered. Sky Sentry, we have no registered pilot or aircraft with that call sign at this facility. Please verify your coordinates. Brent let out a short, derisive laugh. Iron Eagle? What is this, a movie? Probably some kids with a ham radio. He turned back to the old man, his brief distraction over. All right, Grandpa, show's over. Time to go. But the old man wasn't looking at him anymore. His head was tilted slightly, his gaze fixed on the distant sky, as if he could hear something no one else could. He had gone utterly still, the grease on his hands forgotten. A deep, resonant memory flickered behind his eyes, the scream of a scramjet engine, the cold blue of the stratosphere, and a voice in his ear. Eagle, you are go for ingress. Godspeed. The memory was as real as the wrench in his hand, a ghost of a life lived in the silent, lethal emptiness above the world. Eva watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. It can't be, she thought. Iron Eagle wasn't just a call sign. It was a myth, a bedtime story they told young test pilots about the man who flew the Aurora before it was even a rumor. The man who could make a machine do things its designers swore were impossible. He was supposed to be a composite of a dozen different pilots, not a real person. Not a real person fixing a 30-year-old truck in the middle of Arizona. The voice from NORAD came again, sharp with desperation. Negative, Tower. Asset is confirmed at your location. We have a time-sensitive directive. Authorization code Omega-09er. This is a national security imperative. You are ordered to locate Iron Eagle immediately. Brent was just about to make another sarcastic remark when the squeal of tires cut him off. A pair of black, government-issue SUVs, the kind that scream federal agent, barreled down the access road and onto the tarmac, scattering gravel. They screeched to a halt just yards from the old Ford truck, their doors flying open before they had even stopped moving. 4 men in dark suits and earpieces emerged, creating a perimeter. From the lead vehicle stepped an Air Force colonel. He was tall, ramrod straight, with silver hair cut high and tight, and the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite. On his chest was a rack of ribbons that told a story of a career spent in the crucible of command, but his eyes were what held the real authority. They were sharp, focused, and currently sweeping the area with an air of absolute urgency. He completely ignored Brent, who stood there with his mouth half open, looking like a confused child. The colonel's eyes found the old man by the truck and locked onto him. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The colonel's entire demeanor shifted. The hard-edged urgency melted away, replaced by something Eva had only ever seen in history books, in old photos of soldiers meeting a president they truly revered. It was all. He strode forward, his steps precise and measured, stopping exactly 3 feet in front of the old man. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't speak. Instead, he brought his hand up in the sharpest, most profound salute Eva had ever witnessed. It was not a gesture of regulation. It was an act of pure, unadulterated reverence. "General Harrison, sir," the colonel said, his voice low but carrying across the silent tarmac. "We have a problem." Brent Donaldson's face went slack, the color draining from it, as if a plug had been pulled. The words didn't seem to compute. "General? Sir?" He looked from the imposing colonel to the old man in the greasy work shirt, his mind refusing to connect the two. The old man, General Harrison, slowly wiped his hands on the rag hanging from his back pocket. The years seemed to recede from his face, the quiet calmness hardening into a familiar mask of command. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The gravelly rumble was gone, replaced by a clear, crisp tone that expected nothing less than immediate obedience. "Report, Colonel, sir, it's Project Chimera. The telemetry link is down. She's flying blind, and the failsafe protocols aren't responding. She's currently on a trajectory that will take her over hostile airspace in 22 minutes. The general's eyes narrowed. "The manual override?" "Non-responsive, sir. The engineers are locked out. They say the only person who can interface with the core system is the one who built it." A silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. The Project Chimera was the nation's most advanced, most secret hypersonic reconnaissance drone, an unmanned craft capable of Mach 7. It was an asset so valuable that its loss would be a geopolitical catastrophe. And it was lost. The general looked at his old truck, then back at the colonel. "The interface is still in the truck. Give me 5 minutes to get it online." He turned and began walking back toward the vehicle, his movements now fluid and purposeful. The colonel turned to Brent, and for the first time, acknowledged his existence. His gaze was glacial. It was the look of a predator that had just noticed an insect. "You," the colonel said, his voice dripping with contempt. "What is your name?" Brent stammered, his bravado utterly shattered. "B. Brent Donaldson. I'm the manager here." The colonel took a step closer, his shadow falling over the smaller man. "Mr. Donaldson, do you have any idea who you were just threatening to have arrested?" Brent could only shake his head, his eyes wide with fear. "That," the colonel said, pointing a rigid finger at the general who was now pulling a hardened Pelican case from the back of his truck, "is Major General Samuel Harrison. He has more flight hours above 80,000 feet than any 10 pilots alive. He designed the engine on the F-22 Raptor on a napkin because he was bored one afternoon. The medal he wears under his shirt, the one you can't see, is the Air Force Cross, awarded for an action so classified that the citation consists of a single, redacted paragraph. He is, without exaggeration, a living national treasure." As he spoke, 2 F-35 Lightning IIs tore through the sky overhead, their engines a deafening roar that shook the very ground. They weren't on a training run. They banked hard, wings flashing in the sun, a high-speed, military salute. They were the general's escort. Brent looked like he was going to be physically sick. He stared at the old man, who was now calmly opening the case and connecting a series of cables to a ruggedized laptop. This wasn't a vagrant. This wasn't some senile old mechanic. This was a legend. And he had just threatened to have his truck, which was apparently a mobile command center for a top-secret national asset, crushed into a cube. The weight of his own ignorance, his own colossal, arrogant stupidity, crashed down on him. He had mistaken a lion for a stray cat and had tried to shoo it away with a broom. The humiliation was absolute, a burning fire in his gut. He was a small man, and he had never felt smaller. The entire airfield was now watching, the mechanics, the controllers, all frozen in place by the sheer, unbelievable drama of it all. They saw the black SUVs, the armed men, the colonel, and the old man who was now tapping away at a keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. After what felt like an eternity, but was only a few minutes, the general spoke without looking up from his screen. "I have a handshake. The bird is talking to me. Rerouting her to the alternate landing site at Groom Lake. Tell them to have my team ready." The colonel nodded to one of his aides, who spoke quietly into his wrist communicator. He then turned back to the general, his posture still one of unwavering respect. "Sir, Washington is on the line. The Secretary of Defense would like to speak with you." General Harrison held up a hand, still focused on the screen. Tell the secretary I'm a little busy fixing a cracked distributor cap, Colonel. I'll call him back. A ghost of a smile touched the colonel's lips. He knew that tone. It was the same tone pilots had heard for 50 years, the calm at the center of the hurricane. It was the voice of Iron Eagle. He relayed the message, and an entire chain of command, all the way up to the Pentagon, was put on hold by a man in a greasy denim shirt standing in the middle of an Arizona airfield. The crisis was over. The silent, invisible catastrophe had been averted. The general finished typing, closed the laptop, and carefully placed it back in its case. He returned it to the bed of his truck and picked up the wrench he had set down earlier. The world could wait. His truck needed fixing. He slid back under the chassis as if nothing had happened. The colonel watched him go, then turned to leave. He paused beside Captain Rostova, whom he had noticed observing the entire event with a trained, professional eye. He gave her a curt nod. You fly the Vipers, Captain? Yes, Colonel, she managed to say, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Good, he said. Learn from him. True strength is quiet. With that, he and his team climbed back into their SUVs and drove away as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind a stunned silence and a deeply humbled airfield manager. Eva walked slowly toward the old truck, her boots crunching softly on the asphalt. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the runway. The only sound was that same, steady, patient scraping of a wrench on metal. She stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. How do you talk to a living myth? General Harrison, she said softly. The scraping stopped. He slid out from under the truck again, wiping his hands on the rag. He looked at her, and his eyes were kind, the hardness gone, replaced by the gentle wisdom of age. It's just Sam, he said. Haven't been a general in a long time, Captain. I just wanted to say thank you, sir. Eva said, her voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. It was a mix of awe, respect, and a profound sense of gratitude. What you did today, what you've done your whole life. Most people will never know. Sam looked at his gnarled, oil-stained hands. That's the point of it, isn't it? The work is done so that people don't have to know. So they can worry about things like profit margins and getting their coffee on time. He gave her a small, weary smile. A quiet life is the greatest reward there is. He picked up the new distributor cap from his toolbox. It was a simple piece of plastic and metal, a $5 part for a 30-year-old engine. He held it for a moment, this mundane object, and in that instant, Eva saw it all. The contrast was staggering. The hands that held that simple part had also held the controls of machines that pushed the very limits of human ingenuity, flying in realms where the sky turned to black and the stars didn't twinkle. The mind that was focused on getting the timing just right on an old V8 engine had also conceived of systems that kept an entire nation safe. Here was the truth of service, stripped of all its pomp and ceremony. It wasn't about the parades or the medals. It was about the quiet, thankless work, the silent sacrifices made in obscurity, the lifelong commitment to a cause greater than oneself. It was about a man named Sam, who saved the world before lunch and then got back to fixing his truck. If you ever need a hand, Sam, Eva said, a genuine warmth in her voice. Just let me know. He looked up at her, his pale blue eyes twinkling in the fading light. Appreciate that, Captain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm losing daylight. He gave her a final nod, a gesture of shared understanding between two people who knew the call of the sky, and slid back under his truck, home once more in his world of gears and oil, the quiet hero in plain sight.